She's one of the leading legal scholars on technology and the internet, and a highly respected voice on legal issues relating to technology and surveillance. When Aaron Swartz was indicted for downloading articles from the JSTOR database, he reached out to our next speaker for help, and she defended Aaron and challenged the scope of law under which he was persecuted. She recently published a legal analysis of the ways in which the government is misrepresenting and misinterpreting the FISA Amendments Act and the Patriot Act to justify mass surveillance. That article is in the New York Times, and its title is The Criminal NSA. Please join me in giving a warm, warm welcome to Jennifer Granick.
Thanks for coming out today. Today I'm here to tell you that now that we know what the NSA is doing, it's time to demand that our representatives, specifically Nancy Pelosi, stand with us to protect the Fourth Amendment, or we're going to vote somebody into office who will. Now we know that the NSA is tapping fiber optic cables around the world and inside the United States, giving access to information about everything that everyone does on the internet. Now we know that the NSA goes directly to companies and gets our emails, our chats, our communications from Google, from Apple, from Microsoft, from Yahoo. And we know that they get this information from Americans to anyone overseas. They can get that information without a warrant. So when they say, we can't read your emails or listen to your phone calls unless we have a warrant, now we know that that was a lie. Now we know that the NSA is collecting phone record information about every single American, who you call and who calls you. And that information is a map of human interactions and can reveal who your friends are, how often you talk to your family, your interactions with doctors, with lawyers, with religious advisors, with strippers, with whomever. And they have that information on every single one of us and have been collecting it for the past 7 years. So now we know when James Clapper told the Congress that they don't collect any kind of data on hundreds of millions of Americans, now we know that that was a lie. And now we know that at least until 2011, the NSA collected internet records on all of us. Very, very revealing information that they collected on all Americans. We don't know where that information is today, but we know that at least until then they were collecting it. So now we know that mass surveillance is here. We know that now. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? Now that we know what the NSA is doing, it's time for us to change it. The checks and balances that we've been told are in place to protect us, we now know those don't work. The courts, the secret FISA court, approves all the requests for surveillance that come before it. And it makes secret law. It has morphed. It has mutated from a court that used to approve secret targets for surveillance into a court that makes secret interpretations of laws that shock even the legislators who passed those laws. It has mutated into something that makes secret interpretations of the Fourth Amendment that allow warrantless searches so long as the government mouths the word terrorism. That's not a check or balance, and we know that now. Congress is supposed to protect us, but now we know that the people who vote for NSA surveillance get twice as much money from the defense industry as those representatives who fight against it. And now we know that those representatives who fight against it aren't informed what the NSA is doing, and when they ask and they try to find out, they're prohibited from telling us and from telling other legislators under rules about classification and committee proceedings. And now we know that these robust internal protections that the NSA has to make sure that Americans aren't improperly surveilled amount to a user interface with some drop-down menus that have a bunch of pre-approved things that they have to type in there, and then they can surveil people without a warrant.
On behalf of the NSA. He compiled evidence and blew the whistle on AT&T's cooperation with the NSA to unconstitutionally spy on the American people. The EFF recognized him for his whistleblowing and selected him as a winner of the Pioneer Award in 2008. Please join me in welcoming Mark Klein.
Thank you. Thank you. It's frightening to think that it was 10 years ago when I first discovered that the NSA was tapping into internet lines at AT&T. In 2003, when I was transferred to 611 Folsom Street, was working at the AT&T Internet Room, and I discovered they had installed a splitter cabinet which contains splitters. Splitters are just glass prisms that split the laser light beam that carries the information on the internet. And each half of the split contains all the information. And one split went on its way as it was supposed to, and the other half went to the NSA secret room. And I, as a technician, gathered engineering documents to show how this was done, and that they were copying basically the internet data stream, not only from AT&T, but companies that were connected into AT&T's network, major companies like Sprint and many others. And so I had evidence, hard evidence, that they were collecting everything. I knew this was completely illegal according to the Fourth Amendment, because, as you know, the Fourth Amendment requires very specific warrants, naming names and places. And the splitter is a piece of dumb equipment which just sweeps up everything, and that could not possibly be illegal. So this was in 2003, and I was horrified. I thought I was wiring up the Big Brother machine, as I described it to myself, and I made that the title of my book later. But I didn't know what to do about it. This was a scary time. The government was very repressive. This is when they put an American in jail without charges, Jose Padilla. There was a very scary atmosphere. And I sat on it. After I retired, I took the documents with me. And then when the New York Times came out with an article at the end of 2005 revealing that there was warrantless wiretapping going on, I knew I had the evidence. I had documents. I showed how they were doing it. I brought that in January 2006 to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and they joined my documents to a lawsuit against AT&T. And we are fortunate to have an unusual judge. The government very quickly stepped in and tried to get the case dismissed on grounds of state secrets, which often works. But this judge refused to dismiss it, so the case was going to go forward. So then began a big battle. The government wanted to stop this lawsuit, because if the lawsuit went forward, it would reveal the collusion of the NSA illegally with the phone companies, and the trail would lead to George Bush's White House, because he was the one who repeatedly, every 3 months, signed off on it. At one point, signing off on it, even though his own Attorney General refused to sign off on it. It was completely illegal. So I went with my lawyer, tried to contact our Senator Feinstein, who sat on the Senate Intelligence Senate Intelligence Committee. This was in 2006. And we got a taste of Congress. She refused to speak to me. She never said a word to me. Never, ever. To me or my lawyer. Why?
A bag of money.
Well, you can figure out in hindsight, she was the winning agent of the NSA and wanted to protect it from any legal consequences. And she became the spearhead in Congress of a push to pass a special law just for the phone companies, a law to give the phone companies retroactive immunity for any crimes they might have committed. Everybody knew they did commit crimes, but they couldn't speak about it because it was all very secret. So Congress entered into a conspiracy against the Constitution and against the American people. Congress pushed for this bill. 2007, we went to Washington. I went there with the EFF to lobby against this bill. And this was a Democratic conference at Congress at this time. Congress in both houses was controlled by the Democrats. No committee of Congress would invite me to testify. Nobody. I could not get testimony before a committee. We managed to speak to a few individuals, and that told me where Congress was at. They ran away from me. And in 2008, after a long fight, Congress finally passed the retroactive immunity bill with the help, I might say, of then Senator Barack Obama, who switched sides at the last minute, and he helped tip the balance in favor of the immunity bill. Him in the Senate and Nancy Pelosi in the House. And so one can say, even back then, it was the Democratic Party that saved Bush's ass. They helped cover it up. The two parties have been in it together all along, a conspiracy against the Constitution. They knew this was unconstitutional. Why did they need an immunity bill? Because they had to put a legal facade over it. You notice now lately they all boast, the NSA guy, Keith Alexander boasts, it's all legal. Congress has approved it. Well, they're referring to that little yellow sticky they put on it that says legal. Well, it's not constitutional. But Feinstein and Pelosi and the others passed that bill in 2008 that gave immunity to the phone companies and also, by the way, authorized bulk data collection, which is what they had been doing. Bulk data collection means they sweep up everybody, and that violates the Fourth Amendment because you don't need names and specifics. You don't need specifics to do bulk data collection. That's what George Bush started. That's what Obama has continued. That's what they're doing now. So Congress helped shut it up, cover it up for a while because of that bill passed by both parties. I want to emphasize that. Now along comes Snowden. Thank goodness for Snowden. Snowden he probably made close observation of what Congress was doing. He probably watched what happened to other NSA whistleblowers like William Binney and Thomas Drake, who tried to go through legal channels, and they got rewarded by having their homes invaded at gunpoint. And Thomas Drake was prosecuted under the Espionage Act. And so Snowden obviously looked at all this and decided better to leave the country first and make the revelations from a distant country. And that was a smart move. So otherwise they'd throw him in a dungeon like they did to Bradley Manning and try to shut him up. So what has Snowden revealed? I think Snowden has brought it out to far more people, brought it to more consciousness, because he has the documents, indisputable NSA documents, and the court order from FISA. That was very damning. That showed they were sweeping up the data on everybody's phone calls at Verizon. And you can be sure they're doing the same for AT&T, everybody else. Everybody, not just domestic to foreign phone calls, but that order showed they were getting domestic to domestic phone calls. Everybody. They think the whole American population is suspect. That's their mentality. And so Snowden showed they're sweeping up all this. They've got their hands in all the media companies like Google and Yahoo and Facebook. And I think that's when made a lot of people realize, hey, this affects me, okay? And they're not only sweeping all this up, they're storing it. That's something new. Data storage has become so cheap, they can now store everything. And that's the purpose of that new 1 million square foot data warehouse they've built in Bluffdale, Utah. They're storing everything. And so they're building up over 10 years now, data on everybody, little dossiers on everybody. And maybe they're not looking at you right now. But if they want to look at you, they can call it up with that little program that Snowden revealed, X Keyscore. Just call up your name or your IP address, and there's all your email and your phone calls and your web browsing. There it is. And they want to get you, they can get you. And that's scary. I call that the infrastructure for a police state, and that's really scary. Now, there's been all this uproar now, and Congress is starting to run scared. That was that vote the other day. Some rebellious congressman tried to pass a minor amendment to restrain them a little, and Nancy Pelosi helped John Boehner defeat the amendment. They're still at it. I have no hope in changing Nancy Pelosi or Barack Obama. They're embedded, they're up to their necks ideologically in this stuff. The police state and the imperial war everywhere. In my mind, and this is a bit of a tangent, I think they all have to be swept out of power. But as a final note, so now they're running scared. Now they're talking about, well, maybe we'll pass a little reform to make people feel better. Watch out for their reforms. Chuck Schumer is leading this latest effort. He's been talking to Obama, and his reform is going to be to release the statistics on how many things they're watching, so you have an idea of why it's not so bad. But his reform won't restrain anything. So the only thing for me right now is the important thing is to defend the whistleblowers. If you believe in real change and real reform, the first thing you want to do is defend the whistleblowers and prosecute the criminals.
In it, he explains exactly how our personal data is sold online to the highest bidder, and the way in which massive databases of personal data that companies like Facebook and Google maintain have helped make government surveillance simpler than ever before. The film is called Terms and Conditions May Apply, and it's playing here in San Francisco at the Roxy Theater until August 7th. I really recommend you go see it. Please join me in welcoming Cullen Hoback.
Thank you. Wow, I mean, it really is such an honor to be on this stage today, sharing this microphone with some real American heroes. Mark Klein, just one more time for him, please. And, thank you. And Daniel Ellsberg, of course. We'll be speaking later. So I started as a filmmaker. I didn't start as an activist. But the more I dug, the deeper I dug, I couldn't help but become an activist. The reality is that these spy systems that are enabled largely by tech companies are basically posing the greatest civil liberties crisis of our times. And oftentimes we look at these corporations and give them a pass. We say, you know what, you're not accountable for this. And the reality, for the last 15 years, corporations have had a lot to gain, billions to gain, in exchange for handing over information in many cases, vis-a-vis something called the third-party doctrine. This needs to change. Now, when you look at terms and conditions of many of these websites that we all use, on applications that we all use on our phones, the terms and conditions really do reveal the nature of the trade. You know, it's more than just about taking our data. It's also about sharing our data. And in reality, right now, what you hear from a lot of executives, in particular in Silicon Valley, is that privacy is dead, and that we're moving into a new paradigm, and that you know, if we want to have the convenience of these technologies, the reality is that we have to sacrifice our privacy to get there. Well, that's a very convenient thing when you know, that aligns with your business model. That's the reality right now, is that privacy doesn't have to be dead, it's just profitable for privacy to be dead. If Silicon Valley executives really wanted privacy dead, then, you know, then they themselves should change the way in which they're behaving. I think one thing that I show in my film is that CEO Eric Schmidt, well, he's not the CEO anymore, but he's the head of the board at Google, got very angry when CNET published a picture of his home. Well, you know what Google has done? They published pictures of all of our homes, right? The hypocrisy of that is out of control. Mark Zuckerberg on his Facebook page says that he wants to make the world more open and connected. He wants the world to be more transparent. Well, in reality, I tried to get a hold of anyone at Facebook to talk about the privacy issues associated with their site. I never got any kind of returned email. I never got anything back from them at all. I tried many, many times. I even went into their office. The reality is that companies like Facebook and Google want us to give them as much information as possible, us to be as transparent as possible. They themselves are not transparent at all. Facebook was an iron curtain. What I ended up having to do was go to Mark Zuckerberg's house. I stayed outside of his house and waited for him to walk to work. Why? Because I wanted to show that privacy matters to everyone. You know what Mark did? He asked me to turn off the cameras. And I actually was wearing a pair of spy glasses at the time. So I let that roll. And you know what happened after he thought the cameras were turned off? He loosened up. You know why he loosened up? Because he didn't think he was being recorded. Imagine how nice it would be if we could all just tell these companies to stop recording us unless we ask to be recorded first. The point is, everyone needs privacy. You know, the CEOs want privacy as well. People at the very top of government want privacy as well. This is a human right, and everyone understands this. So there's something else that I think we're hearing a lot right now. It's a statement of, I have nothing to hide, so why does it matter? Oh man, I hate hearing that. I was just in Traverse City now. Wherever you stand on Michael Moore, stand on Michael Moore, but I was talking with him. He loves the film, by the way. And he was saying, you know, when he hears that, he goes, well, if you're in your home, why do you have blinds, right? If you know, you have nothing to hide, just sit around naked all day inside of a giant glass house so everyone can see you, right? So when people say, I have nothing to hide, why does it matter? I think that's a really easy argument. You know, you just like, you have blinds on your home for a reason. It's a silly thing to hear from people. And I show in the film time and time again perfectly innocent people whose lives are completely upended as a result of these spy systems. Individuals who make a post that they share with their friends and suddenly SWAT is at their house 2 hours later. Now, this individual in the film, you know, he made a bad joke on Facebook. SWAT shows up at his house. What did the police say when he asked to figure out, you know, how they had gotten this information? Well, they said someone just came into the station and reported what he had said on Facebook, and that's how they figured it out. You know, and he had made basically it was a quote from Fight Club, is what he had posted. You know, and they took it as a threat to the Apple Store. So. This is, and then they, you know, someone walked in and said they don't keep a record of that. That's what they said. Somehow they also knew exactly where he was staying. He didn't have any record there. He wasn't actually living there. He had only been there for like 10 days. So obviously it was a spy system that brought the SWAT to his house that day. This is just the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg. If I can show 3 or 4 cases in the last couple of years where this has happened, it's happening much more. The reality is with these surveillance systems, when these kinds of cases happen, when we see it happening, where people's lives are completely upended by this, it's happening far more than what we're able to actually see. Someone screwed up when we know that the surveillance is going on. That's crappy surveillance. Great surveillance is when we don't know that it's happening. You know, the greatest trick the NSA ever played was convincing the world that it didn't exist. And today, now we know. I mean, we've known for a while, we've had whistleblowers telling us, but Edward Snowden just opened up the door. He opened it up. You know, we're having a mature conversation right now. We're all here for a reason. I'd like it if there were more people here, but you know what? This is a great start. And this conversation is going to continue. And I thank Edward Snowden for that. I hope that my film helps keep this conversation going. We need to end FISA. We need to end the Patriot Act. That's what needs to happen. We need to keep watching the watchers. The last thing, there's 2 final things I want to say. We heard a lot about 1984 today, and one thing that happened a couple of years ago you might remember is Amazon actually pulled 1984 from people's Kindles. They didn't have the copyright to it, and so they actually took 1984, of all books, off of people's Kindles. Well, I want to say, you know, just because there wasn't smoke doesn't mean it didn't burn. Think about that. I'm going to give you one more point. So in my film I show something, which is that Google had been covering up their original privacy policies. They actually backdated their privacy policy to make it look like they had always had the same philosophy. After 9/11, they backdated and made it look like they'd always had the exact same policy on privacy. And if you look at their original privacy policies, it shows a very different corporate philosophy, one that was based largely around anonymity. As a result of the film, in the last month or so, they've actually now gone back and quietly put their original privacy policies there. You know, it's good to be able to hold them accountable, but the reality is that they should not be evil on their own. We shouldn't have to be doing this for them. The idea that a digital trail can be erased is a very scary proposition. So we need to watch the watchers. And if the Founding Fathers were alive today, I can tell you that you can be damn sure they would want the 4th Amendment to apply online.
Hey, all those cops' phones, they're being tapped too. They're tapping your phones too, cops.
Concern with the law that was passed in Illinois is that it prohibits patients from growing their own medicine, and I just want to be clear that the 2014 voter ballot initiative would not prohibit patients in California from growing their own medicine. Is that correct?
No, absolutely not. While it's nice to see different parts of the country, especially some places conservative as Illinois, move forward with you know, cannabis is good, but yeah, the governor there is definitely saying that it would be, you know, one of the more restrictive laws in the country.